And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at a game called Bushido. Now, interestingly enough, Bushido, when I first played it, one of the things that reminded me of is an old PlayStation game called Bushido Blade, which was a great game because in Bushido Blade, when you stab someone, they got wounded or they died. It wasn't like I stabbed you 85 times and each time it took off a little bit of health. And I get why games do that. But that whole idea of lunge parry, it was like a skill. It was like realistic to some degree. And I thought that was neat. And so the weapon you pick small, fast one that might not hurt your opponent. You might easily blocked, or you pick a big one, and if you hit your opponent with that, they were dead. So this game is kind of like that. You're going to be the samurai coming in. You're fighting each other, or just warriors in general, fighting each other. You got to pick your weapon, pick your things, but it's a skill back and forth with some dice chucking in it. Here's how it plays. Each player is going to have a player board that they put in front of them to fight over the course of the game. Your player board is going to have a die that shows your life, which is 12, a wound tracker, which starts here at 0, and some spots to put various things. Players are also then going to get 5 technique cards. At the beginning of the game, this is called the training phase, and you can start with a pre-constructed training deck that the rulebook will tell you, or you can draft where you'll turn over 4 of these cards, you pick one, your opponent picks one, the other 2 are discarded. And you're going to be building up a hand of these cards. Some of the cards have a type that they're part of, some have no type, and then they have different dice that you will be using over the course of the game. Once players are done with that, they're going to take a look at a set of weapon cards. Each player has weapon cards, and you're going to be using one of these weapons over the course of the game. And so I might pick I don't know, I like this club here. This one's pretty good, but this one says I can't strike, so maybe I'll use the katana. Whichever one you pick has a token limit on it. They'll be revealed simultaneously, and you'll be placing some armor tokens. So this one has 2. I'll place 2 armor tokens. And then I'll just put some other tokens here to show that I can only ever have 2 tokens when using this weapon. Players are also going to be picking their starting guard. They're going to pick high, mid, or low, revealing their weapon and taking the technique cards that they have into their hand. And that's all kind of the planning things. You have your arming phase, which is picking the weapon and picking your guard, the training phase where you get the cards, and then the actual duel. In the duel, you'll be taking turns back and forth. So on your turn, you either are going to play a technique card from your hand and resolve its effects, or you're going to change your guard. So when you play a technique, each technique has a school, which is up here. It will be earth, air, fire, water, or shadow. And as you play it, it's going to give you a pool of dice. That pool of dice is going to be added to the dice that are listed in whatever guard you happen to be. So there are 3 types of dice that are included with the game. There are red dice, which are mostly attack dice. There are gray dice, which is kind of a mix, and blue dice, which are kind of like a dodge, avoid die. When playing a technique, so let's say I play tortoise shell, you can discard another card of that same technique to add a die of your choice. I can boost it multiple times. So when you're drafting, if you pick a whole bunch of cards of the same technique, you can do great things with those. But when you discard cards, you're not going to get them back in your hand unless you take the other action, which is changing your guard. When you change your guard, you can change your guard to a new one, and then you'll take back all your technique cards in your hand, and when that happens, you can only roll the dice of your guard. You get no other extra dice that are added to that. Now, players' weapons also will change what happens. There's special abilities that they'll have depending on whether you are on high, mid, or low guard, and each weapon is different. For example, here I can change a miss on the attack die to a hit. I can change that to a hit, and I can discard that to add a hit. So this is going to be a constant attacking type thing, and so each weapon has a very different style. So once you're done with that, you are going to roll the dice. Now, you have different dice here. There's the red dice, like I said, have a lot of hits on them. And when you hit your opponent, that's going to be moving this token down their track. Also, as you are playing, every time you change your guard, you'll get rage tokens, and these rage tokens can be spent on future turns to add more red dice to your attack. You can spend these tokens, if you've gotten them, to re-roll the dice from your attack. And there's even a focus strike die, which is on the red one here, which essentially lets you, it's kind of a burst. It's a hit, and then you get to roll again. Or you can use it to re-roll other things. So there's a lot of cool different options that you have. Now, when you hit someone, you do not do damage to that person as a matter of course. When you hit somebody, you're going to be moving this, but they don't take damage until the end of their turn. And that's good because I can use these symbols here to move it back in the other direction. I'm dodging on my turn. And I can also spend armor tokens, which these give you more armor tokens, by the way. I can spend armor tokens to move it back farther. If I don't move it far enough back, though, at the end of my turn, I'll take this much damage here. And you can see 5 through 10 is death. So I might take 3 damage, which I would mark on my die. And then this gets reset to 0. And that is essentially the game. You're just going to go back and forth until one person loses by having 0 health. Now, there are some variants with the games. There's, like I said, you can pick some starting decks that are mentioned in the rule book. There's also a way to play a 4-player game, but you'll need 2 sets to do that. And so there's a few variations you can play, and there's some expansions and things, but that's the base game. So the game is all about these dice, and they're very good quality dice. Easy to tell which one does which. The symbols on them are pretty easy. Hit, dodge, focus, and get more armor tokens. Very simple. The board itself looks really cool. The tokens, there's really not a lot of components that you're in play. The technique cards, I like the art on them. And there's a lot of cool things that they do. They're fairly simple and easy to understand. Many of them, they'll give you like a special token when you play them, and they show you exactly how many dice. So you know, hey, basically, this is a lightning strike is a lot of attack dice, while the fury of the storm is attack, but also gives defensive dice. And so the cards themselves, like I say, when I look at them, I don't have to sit there and study. They seem fairly, hey, this is what I can do with that card. So when I played this one, and I said it felt like Bushido Blade, the designer emailed me and said that was actually one of the things he was going for, and that makes sense. It's an interesting a concept, this whole, I'm not just rolling tons of dice, I do 20 damage, now I take 10, now you take 6. And again, I don't have problems with games that do that, there are lots of them that do that, but this one has a different feel because of that. So it's kind of weird because this is one of those games where the setup for the game is as important as playing the game itself. And that's why the game is 3 phases, the train. And so when you first play this game, definitely play with the stuff in the box. You'll have no idea what's going on, so you might as well play with one of the preset sets that they mention. I would highly recommend anyone doing it for the first time to do that. After that, even then it's going to take some, moving around like, okay, I'll take these cards with this weapon. And the weapons definitely have a different feel. Am I going to take a weapon where I can never strike my opponent? Am I going to take a weapon that's very defensive and try to whittle him down and do a little bit of damage till he's gone? Or take it and hope that with one big swell, big roll of dice, I push him so far up that he can't dodge on his next turn. So that's a big part of the game. Other than that, the game itself is also interesting. You have 5 cards, not a ton of choices. I pick which card I'm going to play on my turn, decide if I want to throw a few extra cards, if I have the same school, into the mix to get those extra dice, but then I have to probably switch guards next time. When is the best time to switch guards? I just got hit with a lot of damage. Maybe I switch to a defensive thing, but is that enough to block this off? When should I use my armor tokens? When do I use my rage? The game feels fairly strategic. And again, that's kind of weird because it's also feels a little light with the rolling of dice, and it should be noted, there's no question that the rolling of dice is going to definitely affect the game. You can play very well and roll poorly, or vice versa. But the game itself is very quick. I think the box says 30 minutes, but the game could literally be 10. It could be a really fast game, and then you just pick up and play again, or play a series of duels going back and forth. And if you don't like how it's going, you can always say, I'm switching weapons this round, or something to that effect. I like it. I have not played with all the extra stuff. There's little expansions and things to add with it, but I think at its base core, this feels different than other things that are out there. There are a ton of 2-player fighting games. Most of them are mage versus mage, but there's a ton out there, and they usually require knocking damage off your opponent. This one does too, but gives you that opportunity that you could literally kill your opponent with one blow. Which at first, when you hear that, you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the person who gets killed in one blow. But because the game's so fast and interesting, you almost like, when your opponent kills you, you're kind of like, well done, person. So there you go. The cover of this box doesn't really, I think, almost like one. It almost should show like a samurai with a sword, like concentrating on the one task, because that's what I feel the game is. It's a thoughtful dice chucker. How many of those are there? Well, there's one now, and it's called Bushido. Dice Tower Judgment approved.